Give me the strength to overcome temptations and addictions." Nate repeated her words, but he was confused. Prayer was easy for Rachel because she did so much of it. For him, it was strange. They opened their eyes but kept their hands together. There was an odd sensation as his burden seemed to lift. His shoulders felt lighter, his head clearer. But Nate carried so much baggage, he wasn't certain which loads had been taken away and which remained. He was still frightened by the real world. It was easy to be brave deep in the Pantanal, where there were few temptations. But he knew what waited for him at home. "Your sins are forgiven, Nate," she said. "We'll pray again tonight." "It'll take more for me than most folks. Trust me, Nate. And trust God. He's seen worse." "I trust you. It's God who worries me." She squeezed his hand tighter, and for a long moment they watched the water. "I've been thinking about the funeral," Nate said. "I don't want to see a dead child. Javy and I will go back to the village." "Very well. I understand." Chapter 10. Fever. The storm never came. When Rachel returned in the mid-afternoon, she and Laco went straight to the chief and reported on events in the other village. She spoke to Nate and Javy. She was tired and wanted to sleep before they discussed business. Later, she and Nate walked down toward the river to the narrow bench under the trees. They sat close, their knees touching again. "Every village has a local doctor," Rachel said. "He cooks plants and roots to make his medicine. He calls up spirits to help with all sorts of problems. These doctors are my enemies. I'm a threat to their religion. They attack Christians. In a village down the river, I had a small school where I taught reading and writing. It was for the Christians, but it was also open to anyone. A year ago we had malaria, and 3 people died. The local doctor told the village chief that the people were sick because of my school. They were being punished. The school is now closed. The parents of the girl who died are Christians. The local doctor said he could have saved the girl, but the parents didn't call him. He blamed me for her death, and he blamed God. During the funeral today, he began dancing and singing. I couldn't finish the service." Her voice cracked slightly, and she bit her lip. She couldn't cry in front of the Indians. She had to be strong all the time. But she could cry with Nate, and he would understand. "I think you should go now," she said suddenly. "I think I saw a case of malaria in the other village today. Mosquitoes carry it, and it spreads quickly. Trust me, Nate, I've had malaria twice and you don't want it. The second time almost killed me." It never occurred to Nate that she might die. If she died, it would take years to settle the Phelan estate. And he admired her greatly. She was everything he wasn't, strong and brave, happy with a simple life. "Don't die, Rachel," he said. "You're a good man. You have a good heart and a good mind. You just need some help." "I know. I'm not very strong." He had the papers in his pocket. "Can we discuss these?" She read the will slowly. "Troy didn't care for his other children," she said. "I remember the day my mother told me about him. My father had just died. Troy had found me and wanted to visit. She told me the truth about my biological parents, and it meant nothing to me. A year went by. He and my mother became friends over the phone. One day he came to our house. We had cake and tea. Then he left. He sent money for college. He started acting like a father, and I grew to dislike him. Then my mother died. I changed my name and went to medical school. I prayed for Troy over the years, the same way I pray for all the lost people. I thought he'd forgotten about me. He gave her the other legal documents. She read them carefully and said, "I'm not signing anything. I don't want the money. And I want you to do something for me. Don't tell anyone where I am." This would be a huge news story. Humble missionary in jungle says no to $11 billion fortune. The journalists would come to the Pantanal with helicopters and boats to get the story. Nate felt sorry for her. "I'll do what I can," he said. The chief and some of the villagers came to watch them leave. "You're sure we'll be safe in the dark?" Nate asked. "Yes, the chief is sending his best men to guide you. God will protect you. Say your prayers. You're a good person with a good heart." "Thank you. You want to get married?" "I can't." "Sure you can. I'll take care of the money, you take care of the Indians. We'll get a bigger hut and throw away our clothes." They both laughed. Nate stood to say goodbye, and for a second he couldn't see. His eyelids began to ache. The joints at his elbows hurt. Standing ankle-deep in water, Nate put his arms around Rachel and said, "Thanks." "Thanks for what?" "Oh, I don't know. Thanks for creating a fortune in legal fees." She smiled and said, "I like you, Nate, but I don't care about the money and the lawyers. Please don't come back. Just tell your people you never found me." He waved at Rachel and the Indians. At the first turn in the river, he glanced over his shoulder. Rachel and the Indians hadn't moved. He was sweating, even though it was cool. His arms and legs were wet. "I'm sick," he thought. Javy noticed him, and after a few minutes said, "Nate, are you okay?" He shook his head no, and pain shot from his eyes to his spine. "Javy, I think I have malaria." "How do you know?" "Rachel warned me. She saw it in the other village yesterday. That's why we left today. I have a fever, and I can't see." Javy stopped the boat and shouted to the Indians. He quickly unrolled the tent. "You will feel cold and shiver," he said as he worked. "Have you had malaria?" "No, but most of my friends have died from it." "What? Bad joke. It doesn't kill many, but you will be very sick." Moving gently, keeping his head as still as possible, Nate lay down in the center of the boat. Javy spread the tent over him and secured it with 2 empty gas tanks. The Indians were beside them. Laco asked Javy what was happening. Nate heard the word malaria. Then they left. Twice the canoes slowed as the Ipikas discussed which fork of the river to take. Javy kept their boat 100 meters behind. He couldn't see Nate under the tent, but he knew his friend was suffering. Laco was concerned about the American. "What should I tell the missionary about him?" he asked Javy. "Tell her he has malaria." Nate heard their voices. The fever burned him from head to toe. His skin and clothes were wet. His mouth was so dry that it hurt to open it. The storm followed them but didn't catch them. Javy thought they would find Welly in the Santa Lura by dawn. The Indians were tired and ready to stop. Finally, they found a spot and landed. Laco explained that he'd been the missionary's assistant for many years. He'd seen lots of cases of malaria. He looked at Nate. A very high fever, he told Javy. The fever would go away, but there would be another attack in 48 hours. The oldest guide began talking to Laco. He translated for Javy, telling him to keep in the center of the river. In 2 hours, they would find the Paraguay. Javy thanked the Indians and followed the moon to the Paraguay. He arrived at the mouth of the Cabeza an hour after dawn. The Santa Lura was not there. Javy went to find the owner of a nearby house, who told him about the storm that took away the boat. "Where did it sink? What happened to the boy?" "I don't know," the old man said. "He may be dead." Nate wasn't dead. The fever went down, and when he woke he was cold and thirsty. He opened his eyes with his fingers. Every part of his body ached. There was a hot rash on his neck and chest. "Where are we?" he asked Javy. "We're at the Cabeza. Welly is not here. The boat sank in a storm. Can you make it to Corumba?" "I'd rather just die. Lie down, Nate." They left the bank and went on toward Corumba. In the afternoon, they stopped at Fernando's store. Fernando looked at Nate. "This is not malaria," he said, touching the rash on Nate's neck. "Malaria does not produce a rash like this. Dengue does. It's similar to malaria. Fever, sore muscles and joints spread by mosquitoes. You need to get him to Corumba as quickly as possible." It was almost 2:30. Corumba was 9 to 10 hours away. Nate woke once, but couldn't see. He woke again, and it was dark. He tried to say something to Javy about water, just a small drink. But his voice had gone. Rachel lay beside him under the smelly tent, her knees just touching his. He wanted to kiss her on the cheek. "When was your last kiss?" he wanted to ask her. She was there to stop him dying. The fevers rose and fell. She patted his arm and promised he wasn't going to die. She tells everybody this, he thought. Death would be welcome. The touching stopped. He opened his eyes and reached for Rachel. In Corumba, Valdir called a doctor friend and persuaded him to meet them at the hospital. They raced through town in Valdir's car, ignoring lights and signs. "Did you find the woman?" Valdir asked Javy. "What did she say?" "I don't know. I didn't really talk to her. I think she liked our friend back there." Nate was curled tightly in the back seat, hearing nothing. The doctor studied the rash, which began at Nate's chin and stopped at his waist. He was covered with mosquito bites. "Looks like dengue fever," he said after 10 minutes. Because he was a rich American, Nate got the best drugs in the hospital. The fever dropped a little. The sweating stopped. "His temperature should fall soon," the doctor told the nurse. "I'll see him again early in the morning." Nate was sleeping heavily when the nurse took him into a room with 5 other patients. He didn't see the open sores, the uncontrolled shaking of the old man next to him. He couldn't smell the waste. Like his father, Rex Phelan was good with numbers. He realized that 6 law firms were doing the same work. 6 firms fighting the same fight, each wanting a big slice of the pie. It was time for the family to get together. He decided to begin with his brother, T.J. The 2 brothers met in secret. Rex began with the Sneed story. "This is enormous," he said. "It could make or break our lawsuit. Sneed will say he was the only person with Dad when he wrote the will. He wanted $5 million, but he only wants $500,000 now. We'll find some way not to pay him the rest. We have 6 law firms all attacking the same will, and they all expect to get rich when we settle. How much are your boys getting?" "How much is Hark Geddes getting?" Troy asked. 25%. Mine wanted 30. We agreed on 20. Troy Jr. was proud that he'd made a better deal than Rex. "Let's play with numbers," Rex continued. "Imagine we hire Sneed, and he says all the right things. The estate wants to settle. We each get maybe 20 million. 5 goes to Hark Geddes, 4 goes to your boys. That's 9. So we get 31. But if we join up, then Hark will cut his fee. We don't need all these lawyers, TJ." "I hate Hark Geddes. Why don't we fire him and stick with my guys?" "Because Hark found Sneed. This is a nasty business. Hark understands it. If we work together, he'll take 20%. If we can bring in Mary Ross, then he'll cut it to 17.5. Libigale down to 15. "There's no sense fighting," Troy Jr. said sadly. "It'll cost us a fortune. It's time to make peace." Sneed arrived for a meeting with Hark Geddes with a contract he'd written himself. Hark signed it and handed over a check for $500,000. Sneed examined every word, then folded it and put it in his coat pocket. "What was the old man's state of mind the morning he died?" Hark asked. Sneed wanted to say the right thing. "He was out of his mind." "How much time did you spend with him?" "Off and on, 24 hours a day. I was on call around the clock." "Who else did he spend time with?" "Maybe young Nicolette, the secretary. He liked her." "Did he have sex with her?" "Would it help the lawsuit?" "Yes." "Then they had sex all the time." Hark smiled. "Look, Mr. Sneed, this is what we want. We need to know all the strange things Troy Phelan said and did. Sit down and begin writing. Talk to Nicolette. Make sure they were having sex. Listen to what she says." "She'll say anything we need." "How much time do I have?" "We would like to video you in a few days. We'll hear your stories, ask you questions, then we'll coach you. When things are perfect, you'll be ready to talk to the judge." Sneed left in a hurry. He wanted to put the money in the bank and buy a new car. Nicolette needed one, too. Chapter 11. A New Beginning. It was the middle of the night when Nate finally woke up. He rubbed his sore eyes. His forehead was very hot. He was thirsty and couldn't remember his last meal. In the darkness of the room, somebody moved from bed to bed, finally stopping beside Nate's. She touched him gently on the arm. "Nate," she whispered. "It's Rachel." "Rachel?" he whispered. "I'm here, Nate. God sent me to protect you." He reached for her, and she took his hand. "You are not going to die, Nate," she said. "God has plans for you." He could say nothing. Slowly his eyes adjusted, and he could see her. "It's you," he said. Or was it another dream? He rested his head on the pillow. His muscles relaxed, and his joints became loose. The heat left his forehead and face, and he fell into a deep sleep. He dreamed of girls in white dresses floating in the clouds above him. They sang songs he'd never heard before, but they somehow seemed familiar. He left the hospital at noon the next day, against his doctor's advice. No one had seen Rachel at the hospital. Nate had whispered his secret to Javy, who had asked the nurses. After lunch, Javy began walking through town on foot, searching for her. No one seemed to know anything about a white woman arriving from the Pantanal. and Valdir's office, Nate phoned Josh Stafford. "The fever is gone," he said. "I'll come home in a couple of days." "Okay. Tell me about the woman." "She's not interested in the money. You can't talk this woman into anything. I tried. Got nowhere. So I stopped." "Nobody walks away from this kind of money, Nate. Couldn't you talk some sense into her?" "No, Josh. She is the happiest person I've ever met. Perfectly content to spend the rest of her life working among her people. It's where God wants her to be." "She signed the papers?" "No, sorry, boss. I tried to make her sign them. She'll never sign them." Javy found no trace of Rachel, and he began to doubt his friend's story. Dengue makes you see things, makes you hear voices, makes you believe in ghosts. But he kept searching. Nate also walked the streets. He saw the lights of a small church. That, he thought, is where she will be. He stopped in the door and counted 5 people among the chairs. There was no one like Rachel. 3 more people came in from the street. A young man with a guitar began to play and sing. "I need Rachel," Nate thought. "The burdens I left with her have found me again. I need her to sit with me, to hold my hand and help me pray." Nate closed his eyes and called God's name. God was waiting. With both hands, Nate gripped the back of the chair in front of him. He repeated every weakness and evil that attacked him. He confessed them all. He held nothing back. When he finally finished, Nate had tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered to God. "Please help me." He opened his eyes and wiped his cheeks. A voice was calling him, a voice from within. But Nate was confused. Surely God couldn't be calling him. He was Nate O'Reilly, drunk, addict, lover of women, absent father, terrible husband, greedy lawyer. Nate hurriedly until the end of the week. The church. He walked the streets, watched the crowds, checked out hotels and sidewalk cafes, and saw no one who looked like Rachel. On his last day, he stopped at Valdir's office and collected his passport. They parted like old friends and promised to see each other soon. They both knew it would never happen. Javy drove him to the airport. He wanted to spend time in the United States and asked for Nate's help. "I'll need a job," he said. Nate listened with sympathy, not certain if he himself was still employed. "I'll see what I can do," he said. The lady in the seat next to him on the plane ordered a beer. Nate studied the can. Not anymore, he told himself. He closed his eyes and asked God to give him strength. He ordered coffee. Hours later, the plane dropped through the clouds. In Washington, the earth was covered with heavy snow. Josh was waiting for him. "I thought you could stay at our place for a couple of days," he said. "Thanks. How do you feel?" "I'm fine. A little weak, that's all." They rode in silence for a while. Traffic was slow. Then Nate announced, "I'm not going back to the office, Josh. Those days are over." "Why?" "Let's just say I'm tired." Back at the house, he told Josh about his adventures in the Pantanal. He talked about Rachel and described her in great detail. He used her exact words when he talked about the money and the papers. "If she won't take the gift from Troy's will, the money remains in his estate," Josh said. "If, however, the heirs can prove Troy was crazy, then there is no will. All 7 of his children will share equally in his estate. If Rachel doesn't want to share, then her money will be divided by the other 6. They'll get $1 billion each." "Why are we fighting for the will if Rachel says she doesn't want the money?" Nate asked. "First and most importantly, my client gave away his estate as he wanted. I want to protect his will. Second, I know how Mr. Phelan felt about his children. He really didn't want them to get their hands on his money. I share his feelings. I hate to think what they'd do if they got $1 billion each. Third, Rachel could change her mind. We're going to fight, Nate. But Rachel needs a lawyer." He looked at Nate. "You want me to be her lawyer?" "There's no way around it, Nate. You have to take one last case before you leave. Just sit at the table and protect Rachel's interests. We'll go to Judge Wycliffe and tell him you found Rachel, that she doesn't want to come to court. She's not sure what to do, but she wants you to act for her." "We'll be lying to the judge." "It's a small lie, Nate." "I don't want to stay in town, Josh. Where would I go?" "Take my house on Chesapeake Bay," Josh said. "We don't use it in winter. It's at St. Michael's, 2 hours away. You can drive in when you're needed." Nate had to admit that it was a good plan. The lawsuit would never go to court, and he could earn some money for a few months. "I propose a fee of $10,000 a month," Josh said. "Have you heard anything from the government about my tax?" "The government will settle. You'll have to pay them a lot of money, and they'll take away your law license for 5 years, but they won't do anything for a few months." "Thanks, Josh." Nate was tired again. He wanted a warm, soft bed. Had a population of 13,000. There were stores on both sides of the main street, old buildings side by side. The house was on Green Street and had a view of the harbor. The front yard was small and under almost a meter of snow. Nate parked his car and fought his way to the porch. Inside, the house was neat and organized. Josh said a woman came every Wednesday to clean. But there was no coffee, and this was the first emergency of the day. Nate locked the doors and went into town. It was Sunday. All the stores were closed. Nate studied their windows as he walked along. Ahead, the church bells began. Nate went into the church. It was a handsome building, but there were few people inside. Father Phil Lancaster, a little man with thick glasses and curly red and gray hair, stood at the front. They struggled through the songs and prayers. Father Phil noticed Nate sitting in the last row, and they exchanged smiles. Sitting in the warm little church, safe from fevers and storms, safe from the dangers of the city, Nate realized that he was at peace. God was pulling him in some direction. He wasn't sure where, but he was no longer afraid. As he left the church, Father Phil grabbed Nate by the hand. "Welcome," he said. "Welcome to Trinity Church. I'm Nate O'Reilly from Washington. I'm staying in the Stafford house for a few days. Nice to have you with us. When did you arrive?" "This morning." "Are you alone?" "Yes." "Then you must join us for lunch. My wife makes soup every time it snows. It's on the stove now. Please, our house is just behind the church." Phil was already pulling Nate's arm. "What brings you here?" he asked. "It's a long story." "Oh, wonderful. Laura and I love stories. Let's have a long lunch and tell stories." Why not? Thought Nate. There was no food at the house. At the back of the church, Laura was turning off the lights. Phil introduced her to Nate. She had short, gray hair and looked older than her husband. She wasn't surprised to have a guest for lunch. As they ate, Nate told them about his trip to Brazil. In his story, the storms grew fiercer, the boats smaller, the Indians less friendly. When he finished, the questions began. Phil wanted to know about the missionary, her faith, her work with the Indians. It was almost 3 o'clock when Nate left. Phil would happily have sat at the table until dark, but Nate needed a walk. He felt as though he'd known them for years. Near the harbor, he found a small store and bought coffee, soup, and cookies. There were bottles of beer by the counter. He smiled at them, happy that those days were behind him. Chapter 12. A Letter to Rachel. Mary Ross fired Grit early Monday morning. Hark Geddes now had 3 of the 4 heirs from the first family. His percentage had dropped to 17.5, but the sum he could earn was enormous. He called a meeting to tell the other lawyers. The back of Wally Bright's neck turned red with the news. He would kill Geddes if he tried to steal Libigale. "Stay away from my client," he said loudly. "We know the game you're playing. We're not stupid." Sneed came in and Hark introduced him to the group. "Now, the lawyers for the other side will ask you a lot of questions first. So for the next hour or so, assume that we are the enemy." Hark began asking questions. Sneed handled them well and relaxed. Then Ms. Langhorne asked Sneed about the Phelan families. "Did you know about Rachel Lane?" she asked. "I haven't thought about that," Sneed said. "What do you think?" he asked Mr. Geddes. Hark was quick with the fiction. "I guess that you knew everything about Mr. Phelan. Rachel was 10 or 11 when you went to work for Mr. Phelan. He tried to reach out to her over the years, but she would have nothing to do with him. So if he left her everything, it shows that he was crazy." Sneed repeated and expanded the story. When he finished, the lawyers were pleased. They all began to help Sneed find answers for difficult questions. For 3 hours they built his story. Then for 2 hours they tried to tear it down. At one point he was nearly in tears. When he was exhausted, they sent him home and told him to practice his answers. Poor Sneed drove home in his new car. He was determined to give them what they wanted. Nate planned to read and write through the morning. His plans were changed by a phone call. "Are you busy?" Father Phil asked. "I'm at the church working in the basement. I need some help." Nate thought about the soup. There was plenty of it left. "I'll be there in 10 minutes, he said. Phil was measuring wood in the basement. "I'm building 6 classrooms for Bible study," he said. It was a big job, and Phil worked very slowly and took plenty of coffee breaks. As they worked, they talked. Nate talked about some of his troubles, including the problems with the government. "What will you do?" Phil asked. "I have no idea." "Do you trust in God?" "Yes, I think so." "Then relax. He'll show you what to do." For the next 2 days, Nate continued to help Phil in the basement. They made slow progress, but they became friends. Nate was cleaning paint from his nails on Tuesday night when Josh phoned to call him back to the real world. "Judge Wycliffe wants to see you tomorrow," he said. "What does he want?" "He has some questions about your new client. I've told him you're Rachel's lawyer. You're needed. Meet me at noon at Judge Wycliffe's office." Nate put a log on the fire. He could put on a suit and tie. He could look and talk the part. He could say the right words. But he no longer considered himself a lawyer. Those days were over, thank God. He could do it once more, but only once. He told himself that it was for Rachel. But he knew she didn't Wycliffe care. Entered his office at 12:30. "Josh tells me you found the richest woman in the world," he said. "Yes, I did, about 2 weeks ago. And you can't tell me where she is." "She begged me not to. I promised." "Will she appear in my court?" "She doesn't have to," Josh explained. "She knows nothing about Mr. Phelan's mental state, so she can't be a witness. We can proceed with a lawsuit without her. I need a letter from your client saying that she's seen the will and knows what we're doing." "Yes, Judge," Josh said. Judge Wycliffe began to ask questions about Rachel. Questions were dangerous. Wycliffe mustn't know that Rachel didn't want the money. Josh interrupted. "You know, Judge, this is not a complicated case, and everybody's anxious. Why can't we start the lawsuit as soon as possible? Get all the lawyers in one room now and make them produce a list of witnesses and documents. Then set a trial date for 90 days' time." "What about you, Mr. O'Reilly? Is your client anxious to get the money?" "Wouldn't you be anxious, Judge?" Nate asked, and they all laughed. That night, Nate began a letter to Rachel. He had the address of World Tribes in Houston. He would mark the letter private and address it to Rachel Lane. Someone at World Tribes knew who and where she was. There must be some way to contact her. He wrote the date, then, "Dear Rachel." An hour passed, and he tried to think of words that would sound intelligent. Finally, he started writing about the snow. Did she miss it from her childhood? There was 1/2 meter on the ground outside his window. He told her that he was acting as her lawyer and explained what was happening about the will. He told her about Father Phil and the church and the basement. He was studying the Bible and enjoying it. He was praying for her. When he finished, the letter was 3 pages long. Nate read it twice and thought she'd like it. If she received it, he knew she'd read it again and again. Nate wanted to see her again. The story appeared in the newspapers on Friday morning. It said that Rachel Lane was acting through her lawyer, Mr. Nate O'Reilly, to fight the people who were contesting her father's will. Mr. O'Reilly had tracked down Rachel Lane, shown her a copy of the will, discussed the various legal issues with her, and become her lawyer. The Phelan lawyers were astonished by the news. They met at Ms. Langhorne's office to discuss the case. "We've seen nothing signed by this woman," Hark said. "No one knows where she is, except for a lawyer, and he's not telling. It's obvious to me that she doesn't want to come forward." "Lots of rich people are like that," Bright interrupted. "They want to keep quiet. Otherwise everybody would be beating on the door asking for money." "What if she doesn't want the money?" Hark asked. "That's crazy," Bright said, as they all considered the impossible. "It's just a thought," Hark said. "If she doesn't want it, her share will go to the other heirs." The lawyers did some quick calculations. 11 billion less taxes divided by 6. The brown envelope Sirius was sent to the desk of Neva Collier, organizer of South American missions. It was addressed for Rachel Lane, missionary in South America, personal. Inside was a letter addressed to whom it may concern, and a smaller envelope. Neva read the letter aloud. "Enclosed is a letter to Rachel Lane, one of your missionaries in Brazil. Please send it to her. I met Rachel about 2 weeks ago. I found her in the Pantanal. The purpose of my visit was a legal matter. She is doing well. I promised Rachel that I would not tell anyone where she is. She does not want to be disturbed with any more legal matters, and I agreed to her request. She needs money for a new boat and medicines. I will gladly forward a check to you. I want to write to Rachel again. Please let me know that you sent her this letter. Thanks, Nate O'Reilly." It wasn't easy to reach Rachel. Twice a year, on March 1st and August 1st, World Tribes sent packages to the post office in Corumbá. These included medical supplies, Christian literature, and anything else she needed. The post office held the packages for 30 days. If Rachel didn't collect them, they were returned to Houston. This never happened. Every August, Rachel went to Corumba and called the World Tribes Office. In March, the packages were sent up the river on a boat and left at a farm near the mouth of the Zeco River. Laco collected them. In 11 years, Rachel had never received a personal letter. Neva copied Nate's phone number and address, then hid the letter in a drawer. She would send it in a month, with the usual supplies for March. Nate was in bed when the phone rang. A female voice said, "Nate O'Reilly, please." "This is Nate O'Reilly." "Good evening. My name is Neva Collier. I received your letter. I will send Rachel's letter to her." "Thank you. I'd like to write to her again. Have you heard from her recently?" "No." Rachel had been in Corumba 2 weeks earlier. He knew this because she'd come to the hospital. She'd spoken to him, touched him, then disappeared. But she hadn't called the World Tribes Office? How strange. "Why did you find her?" Neva Collier asked. "You've seen the newspapers? You understand what her father did? Somebody had to explain what was happening, and it had to be a lawyer. You mentioned some things she needs down there." Nate told her the story of the little girl who died because Rachel had no medicine for the snakebite. "She can't find enough medical supplies in Corumba. I want to send her whatever she needs." "Thank you. Send the money to me at World Tribes. I'll make sure she gets the supplies. We have 4,000 Rachels around the world, and we don't have a lot of money." "Are the others as special as Rachel?" "Yes. They are chosen by God." They agreed that Nate could send his letters to Neva, and she would send them to Corumba. If either of them heard from Rachel, he or she would call the other. Back in bed, Nate thought about the phone call. Rachel had come to Corumba because she knew from Laco that Nate was very sick. Then she'd left, without calling anyone at World Tribes to discuss the money. It was very strange. Chapter 13. The Lawsuit. The first stage of the lawsuit began on Monday, February 17th. All the people who wanted to fight Troy Phelan's will had to declare their interest. Nate could question them to see if they were acceptable witnesses. Nate didn't want to spend 2 weeks in a room full of lawyers. His attitude changed when he met the Phelan heirs. The first witness was Mr. Troy Phelan, Jr. Nate introduced himself. "Are you currently under the influence of any drugs or alcohol?" he began pleasantly. "I am not," Troy Jr. said angrily. "Which one is your lawyer?" Nate asked, waving at the crowd opposite. "Hark Geddes." The lawyers were annoyed. Nate hadn't learned which lawyers represented each client. It showed that he didn't respect them. "How many wives have you had?" "How many have you had?" Junior shot back. "Let me explain something to you, Mr. Phelan," Nate said. "I will say this very slowly, so listen carefully. I am the lawyer. You are the witness. I ask the questions, you give the answers. Now let's try again. How many wives have you had?" An hour later, they finished with his marriages, his children, his divorce. Junior was sweating and wondering when it would end. Nate used one question to lead to another. No detail was too small for him to investigate. The afternoon was even harder. Nate asked about the $5 million Troy Jr. received on his 21st birthday. "How was the money given to you?" Nate asked. "It was placed in an account in a bank." "How did you get the money from the account?" "By writing checks." "He wrote a lot of them." Troy Jr. never returned to college after he received the money. He simply partied. Nate revealed that Troy Jr. didn't work for 9 years. He played golf and football, bought cars, spent a year in the Bahamas, and lived in a grand style until his money ran out. Then he crawled back to his father and asked for a job. Nate talked about what Troy Jr. did after his father died. "You bought 2 expensive Porsches on credit. Now, 2 months later, you haven't paid a dime. You owe money for furniture. American Express wants more than $15,000. A bank is taking you to court because you owe them money, correct?" The witness nodded. They finally stopped at 6 o'clock. 10 minutes later, Troy Jr. was in a bar 2 kilometers away. The next day, they started again. Nate looked at Troy Jr. and recognized the face of a drunk, the red eyes, the pink cheeks and nose. He questioned Jr. about the day his father died. "You saw the psychiatrists examine your father. You missed nothing?" "No, I missed nothing." "Your family hired Dr. Zadell, correct?" For 10 minutes, Nate questioned him about Dr. Zadell. He got what he wanted. Zadell was hired because he had an excellent reputation and was very experienced. Troy Jr. admitted that he was pleased with Zadell and had left the building believing that his father was sane. "So why did you fire Dr. Zadell?" "Because he was wrong. My father fooled the doctors, then jumped out of the window. He was obviously crazy." "What would have happened if your father had signed the other will and not the handwritten one, and then he jumped? Would he be crazy?" "We wouldn't be here." Nate moved on to talk about the money Junior owed and his failed businesses. They finally freed the witness at 5:30, day 2. He started the next day with Rex Phelan. Again, Nate asked hard questions about Rex's business deals. By noon of the following day, he'd revealed that Rex owed more than $7 million. There were a lot of court cases against him, and the FBI was investigating him. During the afternoon, Nate talked about the $5 million inheritance Rex wasted. At the end of the day, the Phelan lawyers hoped that the worst was behind them. Abigail came in early on Friday morning. Nate asked about her $5 million, and under pressure, she told stories of good drugs and bad men. She now lived with an ex-biker and ex-addict called Spike. "What would you do if you got 1/6 of your father's estate?" Nate asked. "Buy lots of things," she said. "But I would be smart with the money this time, real smart." "What's the first thing you would buy?" "The biggest motorcycle in the world for Spike. Then a nicer house." Her eyes danced as she spent the money. Mary Ross Phelan Jackman followed. The early questions revealed that she took her $5 million and lived in Italy for 3 years. At 28, she married a doctor and had 2 girls. It wasn't clear how much of the money was left. They lived well, but were heavily in debt. Ramble came in after lunch. After a few questions, it was obvious that he was as stupid as he looked. He said that he seldom went to school, lived alone in a basement, liked to play the guitar, and planned to be a rock star soon. He played no sports, had never seen the inside of a church, spoke to his mother as little as possible, and watched MTV when he was awake and not playing his music. Gina was the last witness of the week. 4 days after her father's death, she and her husband had signed a contract for a $3.8 million house. "How do you plan to pay for the home?" Nate asked. The answer was obvious, but she couldn't confess it. "We have money," she said. "Let's talk about your money," he said with a smile. "You're 30 years old. 9 years ago, you received $5 million. How much is left?" She struggled with the answer for a long time, but finally admitted that there was only $200,000 in her bank account. Her husband, Cody, had invested millions in bad business deals. As Nate left the city that night, he thought about the Phelan heirs. He felt sorry for them, for the way they were raised. But he knew that in their hands the money would cause pain and unhappiness. It was late when he arrived in St. Michael's, and as he passed the church, he wanted to stop, go inside, kneel, and pray to God to forgive him for the sins of the week. The next day, Nate sat with Phil on the front steps of the Stafford house. "I'm planning a trip," he said quietly. "I need to see my kids. I have 2 younger ones, Austin and Angela, in Salem, Oregon. My older son is a student in Evanston, and I have a daughter in Pittsburgh." "When did you see them last?" "It's over a year since I saw Daniel and Caitlin, the 2 from my first marriage. I took the 2 younger ones to a ball game last July. I got drunk and don't remember driving back home." "Do you expect the trip to be successful?" Phil asked. "I'm not sure what to expect. I want to hold my kids and apologize for being such a bad father. But I'm not sure how that's supposed to help them now." "You can't keep on blaming yourself, Nate. You're allowed to forget the past. God certainly has. Show your kids what you are now." Later, long after Phil had gone home, Nate sat by the fire and began another letter to Rachel. It was his 3rd. "Dear Rachel," he began, "I have just spent a very unpleasant week with your brothers and sisters." He told her he was sending a check to World Tribes for $5,000 for a boat and medical supplies. A lot of good things, he informed her, could be done. Tuesday morning, Sneed came into the courtroom. The lawyers had been coaching him for weeks. It was important that the judge believed his stories. Josh had known Sneed for many years. Mr. Phelan often talked about getting rid of him. Josh guessed that he was being paid to give evidence, and had discovered that Sneed now had an expensive apartment and a new car. Sneed was ready. If Nate asked him whether he was being paid to appear, Sneed would lie about the $500,000 he had already received and the promise of a further $4.5 million. Nate introduced himself and then asked loudly, "Mr. Sneed, how much are you being paid to give evidence in this case?" Sneed thought the question would be, "Are you being paid?" not "how much." He looked wildly at Hark Geddes. Mr. O'Reilly seemed to know everything. The Phelan lawyers shrank in their seats. "How much are you being paid?" Nate asked again. $500,000, Sneed admitted. "Have you already received this money?" Sneed didn't know whether to lie or tell the truth, so he said, "Yes." $500,000 now, how much later?" Nate asked. Anxious to start lying, Sneed answered, "Nothing." "Who paid you this money?" "The lawyers for the Phelan heirs." "Did you go to them, or did they go to you?" "I went to them." Finally, Sneed was on familiar territory. "I was with Mr. Phelan before he died, and I knew the poor man was out of his mind." "How long did you work for Mr. Phelan?" 30 years. "And you knew everything about him, right?" "Yes." "And you didn't tell anyone that he was crazy?" Sneed thought he was doing well. "It was a private matter." "Until now. Until they offered you $500,000, right?" Sneed could not think of a quick reply. "In the last 14 years of his life, Mr. Phelan wrote 11 wills. In one of them, he left you $1 million. Did you tell anyone then that he was crazy?" "It wasn't my job to tell." Nate continued to question him. Late in the afternoon, he suddenly asked, "Did you sign a contract with the lawyers when you took the $500,000? A simple no would have been enough, but Sneed hesitated, looked at Hark, and then looked at Nate. Of course not," he said. Nobody believed him. Nicolette, the secretary, lasted for 8 minutes. She was 23, with few qualifications except for a nice chest, a pretty face, and blonde hair. Nate asked, "Did you ever have sex with Mr. Phelan?" She tried to look embarrassed, but said yes anyway. "For how long?" "Usually 10 minutes. No, I mean for how long a period of time? Starting in what month and ending when?
Oh, I only worked there for 5 months.
Did Mr. Phelan have any marks on his body? Any of the Phelan wives could have told the lawyers that Troy had a purple mark the size of a silver dollar at the top of his right leg. Nobody had asked.
Not that I recall,
Nicolette answered. No further questions, Nate said. Nicolette left the room, and Nate slid a photo across the table to his enemies. It was a picture of Troy Phelan's body. Nate didn't say a word, didn't need to. The mark stared out from the photo. Chapter 14. The Settlement. At the end of the week, Nate left the city. He was exhausted from 9 days of questioning the Phelan heirs. He felt ashamed. He pitied the Phelan children. He felt sorry for Sneed, a sad little man who just wanted to survive. 2 days later, Nate arrived in Salem, where his kids from his second marriage lived with their mother, Christy, and her new husband, Theo. The last time he saw them, Nate was drunk and fought with his ex-wife in the front yard while the children watched. Theo had threatened him with a shovel. Nate later woke up in his car in the parking lot of a McDonald's with 6 empty beer cans on the seat beside him. He called Christy 4 hours before he arrived at their home. "Christy, it's me, Nate," he said. "I'm in Oregon. I'd like to see the kids. Maybe tonight? Tomorrow?"
Well, sure, Nate. I guess we can work something out. But the kids are very busy, you know. School, dance class, soccer.
How are they?
They're doing very well. We love Oregon.
They agreed to have dinner the following night. That gave her enough time to prepare the kids. Theo decided to work late. Nate kissed Angela. Austin just shook hands. Christy stayed in her bedroom for an hour while their father got to know his children again. Dinner lasted an hour. At 7 o'clock, Nate said he had to go.
"I have a soccer game tomorrow, Dad," Austin said,
and Nate's heart almost stopped. He couldn't remember the last time he'd been called Dad.
"It's at the school," Angela said. "Could you come?"
Nate didn't know what to say. Christy settled the issue.
"I'll be there. We could talk," she said.
"Of course I'll come," he said. The children kissed him. Driving away, Nate suspected Christy wanted to see him 2 days in a row to examine his eyes. She knew the signs. Nate stayed in Salem for 3 days. He watched his son play soccer and was full of pride. He was invited back to dinner, but agreed to come only if Theo joined them. He had lunch with Angela and her friends at school. He left Salem with a broken heart. How could a man lose such a wonderful family? He remembered almost nothing about the kids when they were smaller. No school plays, Christmas mornings, trips to the mall. Now they were almost grown, and another man was raising them. While Nate drove through Montana, Hark Geddes sent more papers to the court. There was no word from Rachel Lane. She obviously had no interest in the lawsuit. Didn't she want the money? It was a crazy idea, but why hadn't she appeared in court? The heirs couldn't win. They had to find a reason to settle. Rachel Lane's lack of interest with his child met Nate in a bar near the university. He was waiting with a girl. Both were smoking and had bottles in front of them. "This is Steph," Daniel said. "She's a model." The first thing Nate noticed about Steph was her gray lipstick, applied heavily to her thick lips. She was certainly thin enough to be a model. Nate disliked her immediately. "You want a beer?" Daniel asked. "No, just water," Nate said. Daniel shouted at the waiter. "How's school?" Nate asked. "I dropped out." Daniel was angry and tense. The girl was there for 2 reasons. She would prevent hasty words in a fight. Nate suspected that his son had no money, that he wanted to punish his father for lack of support. He was afraid, though, because Nate was weak and might start to slide again. Steph would keep a hold on his anger and his language. The second reason was to make the meeting as short as possible. "Why did you drop out of school?" Nate asked. "It was boring." "He ran out of money," Steph said helpfully. Nate wanted to pull out his checkbook and solve the kids' problems. That's what he'd always done. But now Daniel was 23, and it was time for him to sink or swim on his own. "It's good for you," Nate said. "Work for a while. It'll make you appreciate school." After 4 drinks, Steph was drunk, and Daniel and Nate had nothing else to say. He wrote down his phone number at St. Michael's and gave it to Daniel. "This is where I'll be for the next couple of months. Call me if you need me." "See you," Daniel said. "Take care." 2 days later, he was in Pittsburgh for his 3rd and final meeting with his children. It didn't happen. He'd spoken twice to Caitlin, and the details were clear. She said she'd meet him for dinner at 7:30 at the restaurant in his hotel. She called him at 8:30 and said that a friend had been involved in an accident. She was at the hospital. Nate suggested that they have lunch the following day. Caitlin said that she couldn't. Her friend had a head injury, and she planned to stay with her until she was stable. She couldn't see Nate. She couldn't leave the hospital. Did she hate him so much? In a lonely hotel room in a city where he knew no one, it was easy to pity himself. He grabbed the phone and got busy. He called Phil to check on things at St. Michael's. He called Sergio. He felt surprisingly under control. His hotel room had a minibar, and he hadn't been near it. He called Josh. "You need to come home, Nate," Josh said. "I have a plan." Nate wasn't invited to the peace talks. Josh wanted to gain the trust of the Phelan lawyers. His plan was to meet with Hark and the others, then with Nate, until they struck a deal. The Phelan lawyers dreamed of a quick settlement. They believed they would become millionaires. Josh began by giving his opinion that the lawyers couldn't win their lawsuit. Troy Phelan's will was legal. Phelan's children and ex-wives had carefully chosen the 3 psychiatrists. He talked about Rachel Lane, as if he'd known her for years. She was a wonderful lady who lived a very simple life in another country. She didn't understand legal matters and didn't want to fight. And she'd been closer to Troy than planned to do with the money, one of the lawyers asked. "I'm not sure," Josh said, as if he and Rachel discussed it every day. "She'll probably keep a little and give most of it to charity. In my opinion, that's what Troy wanted. He knew that if your clients got the money, it wouldn't last 90 days. By leaving it to Rachel, he knew it would be passed on to people in need." "We can take this lawsuit to the highest courts," Langhorne said. "Does she realize this could take years?" "She does," Josh said. "That's why she would like to discuss settlement possibilities." "Where do we start?" asked Wally Bright. For a long time they talked numbers. Then Josh said, "Nate O'Reilly has contacted his client. She will offer each of the 6 heirs $10 million. The lawyers made rapid calculations. Hark had 3 clients. 17.5% gave him a fee of $5.25 million. Wally Bright would collect $5 million from his contract with Libigale and Spike. The other lawyers would collect $2 million. Wally spoke first. "My client will settle for no less than $50 million. The others shook their heads too and tried to look disgusted at Josh's offer. They talked about numbers for a while. Then Josh said, "Rachel Lane is not a greedy woman. I think she might settle at $20 million per heir." The lawyers' fees doubled, over $10 million for Hark alone. Poor Wally at 10 million now suddenly felt sick and asked to leave the meeting.
Nate was helping Father Phil when the phone rang. It was Josh.
"It couldn't have gone better. I stopped at 20 million. They want 50.
50? Nate said in disbelief.
Yes, but they're already spending the money. I bet 2 of them are at the Mercedes garage right now. We should complete the deal on Wednesday."
"I can't wait," Nate said. "Time for a coffee break."
"We meet the judge on Wednesday," Nate told Phil. "Then I'm going back to the Pantanal to tell Rachel what's happened."
"Are you excited?"
"I don't know. I want to see her, but I'm not sure she wants to see me. She's very happy, and she doesn't want any part of this world."
"Then why do it?"
"Because if she rejects the money again, the other side gets everything." "But you've already said that Rachel won't take the money. She's not going to change her mind," Phil said. "No, never. So the trip down is a waste of time." "I'm afraid so. But at least we'll try." All the Phelan heirs were in the courtroom, except for Ramble. Judge Wycliffe explained that the purpose of the meeting was to explore a settlement. He made it clear that he didn't think the Phelan lawyers had much of a case. He asked Josh to tell him about the earlier settlement meeting on Monday. "I want to know exactly where we are," he said. Josh was brief. The heirs wanted $50 million each. Rachel was offering $20 million to settle. Nate was bored. It would be fun to stand up and tell them that Rachel wasn't offering any money to settle and run out of the room. They would sit in shock for a few seconds. Then they would chase him like hungry dogs. When Josh finished, Hark began to speak. He talked about the Phelan children and their problems, admitting that they were rich and spoiled. Their father didn't care for them, and they hadn't learned the normal lessons children learn from their parents. They made many mistakes when they received $5 million on their 21st birthdays. Now they knew better. Hark spoke well, and when he sat down, the room was silent. The lawyers thought Nate controlled the money. He could fight them for an hour or two, try to offer less than the $50 million, but he wasn't in the mood. "My client will agree to $50 million, he said. "Well then," Wycliffe asked, "do we have a deal?" Out of habit, the Phelan lawyers put their heads together. They grouped around Hark and tried to whisper, but words failed them. "It's a deal," Hark announced, $26 million richer. Rachel had to sign and approve the settlement. Nate said that it would take a few days for him to get the signature. Chapter 15. Return to the Pantanal. On Friday afternoon, Phil drove Nate to the Baltimore-Washington airport. In 9 hours, he would be in Corumbá. He and Josh had written a trust document for Rachel. The money she received would be placed in a trust named the Rachel Trust. The money itself wouldn't be touched, but the trustees could invest it and use the profits for charity work. If Rachel wanted, she would never see or touch the money. It would take only a quick signature, and the Phelan estate would be closed. If she didn't agree to sign, then she must write a letter to say that she didn't want the money. She could decline the gift, but she had to tell the court. The law would then give the money to the Phelan children. How would she react when he arrived? He hoped that she would be delighted to see him, but he wasn't sure. He remembered her waving to his boat as he left. She was standing among her people, waving him away, saying goodbye forever. She didn't want to be bothered with the things of the world. Valdir had hired a helicopter which took him to the trading post in the Pantanal. His old friends Javy and Welly were waiting for him on the ground. Time was precious. Nate feared storms, darkness, floods, and mosquitoes, and he wanted to move as quickly as possible. Nate and Javy quickly climbed into the boat and set off. Javy thought it would take them 3 hours to reach the Indian settlement. The trees on both sides of the river grew thicker, and Nate began to recognize the territory. Finally, they stepped off the boat where Rachel had waved goodbye. A young Indian ran toward them. He told them to stay there by the river until further orders. He seemed scared. As they waited, Javy talked about his efforts to find Rachel and Corumba. "I tell you," he said, "I have listened to people on the river, and the lady did not come. She was not in the hospital. You were dreaming, my friend." Nate didn't want to argue. He wasn't sure himself. A mosquito circled Nate's hand. He wanted to crush it, but instead he waited. Would his super-repellent work? His ears, neck, and face were covered in oil. The mosquito made a sudden dive toward the back of his hand, then stopped. It pulled away and disappeared. A second attack of dengue would probably kill him. Nate wasn't taking any chances. Nate watched the village. He expected to see Rachel move elegantly between the huts and along the path to greet them. By now, she knew the white man was back. They saw the chief walking slowly toward them, followed by an Ipika who Nate recognized. They stopped about 20 meters from the bench. They weren't smiling. In fact, the chief looked very unpleasant. In Portuguese, he asked, "What do you want?" "Tell him we want to see the missionary," Nate said, and Javy translated. "Why?" came the reply. Nate remembered the chief as a man with a quick smile and a big laugh. Now his face had little expression. His eyes looked hard. He stood as far away from them as possible. Something was wrong. Something had changed. He told them to wait, then left again and went back to the village. Half an hour passed. By now, Rachel knew who they were. The chief would have told her. And she wasn't coming. He was alone. They followed him for 50 meters, then moved behind the huts on another trail. Nate could see the area around the village. It was empty. There was not a single Ipika walking about. No children were playing. No women were cooking and cleaning. There was no sound. The only movement was the smoke from their fires. Then he saw faces at the windows. They were being watched. The chief kept them away from the huts as if they were carrying diseases. He turned onto another trail, one that led through the woods for a few moments. When they came to the end of it, they were near Rachel's hut. There was no sign of her. The chief led them past the front door and to the side. Under the thick shade of the trees, they saw the graves. The matching white crosses were made of wood. They were small and stuck into the fresh dirt at the far end of both graves. The chief began talking. "The woman is on the left. Lako is on the right," Javy translated. "Malaria has killed 10 people since we left." The chief went on talking. Nate looked at the pile of dirt on the left. Rachel Lane was buried there, the bravest person he'd ever known, because she had no fear of death. She welcomed it. She was at peace, her soul finally with God, her body lying forever among the people she loved. She wouldn't want anyone to be sad. She wouldn't approve of tears. And Nate had none to give her. He'd hardly known her. But his heart ached anyway. He'd thought about her every day since he left the Pantanal. He'd dreamed about her, felt her touch, heard her voice, remembered her wisdom. She'd taught him to pray and given him hope. He'd never met anyone like Rachel Lane, and he missed her greatly. "The chief says we can't stay long," Javy said. "The spirits blame us for the malaria.
It arrived when we came the first time. They are not happy to see us. He has something to show you." Slowly, Nate followed the chief into Rachel's hut. The chief pointed to a box on a small table. "There are things in that box for you," Javy translated. "For me?" "Yes. She knew she was dying. She asked the chief to guard her hut. If the American came, then show him the box." Inside the box there were 3 letters from world tribes. Nate didn't read them because at the bottom of the box he saw her will. On it she had written, "Last Testament of Rachel Lane Porter." It read, "I, Rachel Lane Porter, child of God, resident of His world, citizen of the United States, am sane and healthy. This is my last testament. 1. This is my first and last will. Every word is written by my hand. 2. I have a copy of the last testament of my father, Troy Phelan, dated December 9th, 1996. He left me most of his fortune. 3. I do not reject any of Troy Phelan's estate, nor do I want to receive it. Place it in a trust. 4. The income from the trust can be used to A. Continue the work of world tribes missionaries around the world. B. Spread the word of Christ. C. Protect the native people in Brazil and South America. D. Feed the hungry, heal the sick, shelter the homeless, and save the children. 5. I appoint my friend Nate O'Reilly to manage the trust. Signed the 6th day of January 1997 at Corumbá, Brazil. Rachel Lane. There was a second letter Porter, typed and written in Portuguese. Nate read the will again. January 6th was the day he walked out of the hospital in Corumbá. She wasn't a dream. She'd touched him and told him he wouldn't die. Then she'd written her will. Nate gave the second letter to Javy and told him to read it. "It's from a lawyer," Javy said. "He says he saw Rachel Lane Porter sign her testament in his office in Corumbá. She was mentally okay, and she knew what she was doing. It is signed by some other people as well." They stepped into the sunlight. The chief had his arms folded over his chest. He wanted them to leave. Nate removed the camera from his bag and took pictures of the hut and the graves. He made Javy hold her will while he knelt by her grave. They found the trail and headed for the woods. As the trees grew thicker, Nate turned for one last look at her hut. He wanted to take it with him, somehow transport it to the States and preserve it. Then the millions of people she helped would have a place to say thanks. But that was the last thing she would want. The chief said something as they got into their boat. "He says he doesn't want us to come back," Javy said. "Tell him he has nothing to worry about." The chief was already walking away toward his village. Nate wondered if he missed Rachel. She'd been there for 11 years. Was he sorry she was gone? Or was he relieved that his gods and spirits now ruled again? What would happen to the Ipikas, who were Christians now? Javy stopped the motor and guided the boat with a paddle. The current was slow and the water was smooth. Nate carefully opened the satellite phone. Within 2 minutes, he was talking to Josh. "Tell me she signed the letter," Josh shouted. "You don't have to shout, Josh. I can hear you." "Sorry. Tell me she signed it." "She signed a letter, but not ours." "She's dead, Josh. She died 2 weeks ago. Malaria. She left a will, just like her father." "Do you have it?" "Yes, it's safe. Everything goes into a trust. I'm the trustee. What happens now?"
"Nothing happens," Josh said. "Troy Phelan's will is paid out. His estate goes to Rachel. It happens all the time in car accidents. The husband dies one day, then the wife dies the next day. The money goes from estate to estate. The settlement has already been agreed. The other heirs will get their money, or what's left of it, after the lawyers take their cuts. Read the will to me."
Nate read it very slowly.
"Hurry home," Josh said.
Javy had listened to every word of the will. When Nate put the phone away, he asked, "Is the money yours?"
"No, the money goes into a trust."
"What is a trust?"
"It's like a big bank account. Every day it earns more money, and I decide where that extra money goes." They found the boat late in the afternoon. Welly was fishing. Nate called Josh again. "Call the jet back from Corumba," he said. "I don't need it. I'm going to take my time coming home. The Phelan lawsuit is settled. There's no rush." Javy was at the wheel of the boat. Welly sat below in the front, his feet just above the water. Nate tried to sleep, but the noise of the engine kept him awake. He watched the river. Somehow, she'd known that he wasn't a drunk anymore, that his addictions were gone. She'd seen something good in him. Somehow, she knew he was searching. She'd found a purpose for him. God told her. Javy woke him after dark. "We have a moon," he said. They sat in the front of the boat, following the light of the full moon as the river flowed toward the Paraguay. "The boat is slow," Javy said. 2 days to Corumba." Nate smiled. He didn't care if the journey took a month.